if it's a skill, that means you can get better at it. If it's just you being you, how do you get better at being you? That's the key. Preparation leads to relaxation.
Welcome back to the jurytrial.com podcast, where we interview some of the best trial lawyers in the country. Today, we have a special guest, Dan Ambrose. Probably doesn't need an introduction for most of our listeners, but for those of our listeners who have not heard of him, he's tried over 150 jury trials. He's the founder of Trial Lawyers University, and he's a mentor of mine, great person. Dan, so happy to have you here today.
Hey, Mike. Thanks. Good to be on your new Trial Lawyers podcast with you and Bob.
Well, it's very fitting because we're in our new podcast studio. This is the first time we're recording in it, and what better person to have on but you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Cool. I just got my new podcast studio out here at my beach house, so I see that. I was inspired. I knew you guys were upgrading. I'm like, I got to upgrade too. I cannot be left behind and have some mediocre environment when these guys are coming strong from Wisconsin. So thanks for the inspiration on that one, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. It actually feels a lot better to be in the studio than at our desks.
Yeah.
So this is cool. There's a lot to talk about. We just had a amazing time at Huntington Beach 2026. Phenomenal event. I want to just start briefly because I know you've been on a lot of podcasts and most people who are listening are going to know who you are. So you don't have to cover the whole thing, but give us a sense for why you started Trial Lawyers University. How did you get to the point where you decided that was something that you wanted to do, that the personal injury bar needed? Just walk us through that.
Well, I started teaching skills for lawyers back in 2012 at my apartment in West Hollywood, California. I just moved there because I was friends with Nick Raleigh from the Trial Lawyers College, and he encouraged me to come to California and become a PI lawyer. And so that was what I did because I was a criminal defense lawyer back in Michigan and I enjoyed my life and everything, but it honestly felt like Groundhog Day. It just, between the weather and crappy, and I was a criminal defense lawyer, so you can't really make a lot of money. And I see all these people making a lot of money and really having more enjoyable lives that weren't just stress and work. And I was like, I think I'd like to have that life too. So I came to California. I didn't have any friends. I moved here when I was about 45. And so I just run these workshops to meet people and start to develop my skills. And then I started doing a more formalized program called the Trojan Horse Method. And I did that for about 6 years and it was going real well. I mean, I travel around the country and do these little workshops. I met so many people. But that's what really gave me the foundation to move to the next vertical, which was when the pandemic came along. I had all these, I started doing like small lecture programs called case analysis. I started that like a year earlier. And that was really taking great trial lawyers who got verdicts and spending a day with them in front of an audience and kind of walking through their trial from voir dire to closing argument and the jury instructions so that I could figure out how they got these verdicts, right? Because, that's the cool thing about personal injury is that no case has any set value. Case is based upon the lawyer's skill set and their belief, and, obviously the case itself, but the lawyer has a big variable in the PI world. And, but when the pandemic came along, I'd had a case analysis scheduled for the following week. And I was doing trial consulting back then and still teaching my workshops, but that all came to a quick end very quickly, as you know, during the pandemic in February 2020. And that's when a friend of mine named Brad Eggenberg calls me up and says, Ambrose, you got to do something. He said, this is when real business is done. And I said, what are you talking about? I've just lost everything. And I had to return a whole bunch of money, cancel programs. And I'm all by myself in this massive apartment in downtown LA and feeling very, very, very despondent, very depressed in its own way. And I was looking out across the city and I was just picture like a zombie apocalypse, so much desperation with these people and having no jobs, no money, it was frightening. But I was like, when you said, what should I said, he goes, you got to figure out, Eggenberg goes on to tell me, you got to figure out how to serve your community. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you have in mind? He's like, I got no idea, but you got to do something. And so that really planted the seed for me. And then another friend of mine came over the next day. His name's Ari Moss, and we were watching Court Review Network, and I was commenting on the trial lawyers and their strategy. And he's like, you should do like a post-trial analysis of these verdicts on CVN. And you can maybe even get the trial lawyer who did the trial to come on and discuss it too. I was like, hey, that's not a bad idea. If they don't want to come, I could do it anyways. And that's how I got started. And, it built from there. Then the CVN would connect me with Lloyd Bell and Keith Mitnick. And so I did some program with, and then met Brian Panish and, Roger Dodd, all these great trial lawyers from around the country where I really they didn't have any reason to talk to me. I had a reason to talk to them, but no reason to talk to me. And then we started doing these webinars, these breakdowns, and they started getting momentum and it was really, and I started getting, I think, better at the hosting. And it was really great. And then, you were there in 2021 in October at the Mandalay Bay for the first TLU Live. And we had 750 people there. And, that was a very different production than what we just did in Huntington Beach. I mean, very different production. But, but I was starting out, you know what I mean? I know you had to buy breakfast and lunch and dinner for everybody. I'm like, shit, that costs a lot of money. But you know what? If you're hosting people, you gotta be a good host, treat them right, make them feel like they're special and do it first, and I really work on that now, which you just, kind of witnessed at the last, I was very proud of that program. I mean, there was obviously some glitches, there always are, but, as far as doing, the content and the community building and the networking building and, we were able to do breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for 5 days in a row. So I was very happy about that. I think most people I talked to said, had the greatest time ever and met more new friends. I mean, TLU is like a friend machine. If you don't make friends at TLU, you got a real personality problem. So that's kind of how it all got started. And then I kind of branched into different things now. I'm doing an AI boot camp at my house on, mastering Claude. And Claude Co-work that's taught by an attorney. And it's probably 10, 15 people. But then we're doing an AI conference next year too, February 18th and 19th, because I don't know anything about AI, nothing. I'm the most unsophisticated person there is, but I'm going to learn. I figure, shit, if I can learn it, the most unsophisticated amongst the technology guys could do it too. So it's kind of an all-encompassing answer, I think, there, Mr. Karp.
Well, you say you're not an expert in AI, but I hear there's Dan AI on TLU On Demand who I've chatted with. So what's that all about? Well,
I'm good at hiring people to create things like Dan GPT, the all-knowing Dan. So, but I think that works pretty well. And on that front, I'm rebuilding the TLU On Demand website because it hasn't really had a facelift in a while. And so I'm going to make it. Also, one of the features of it is going to be a enterprise version. So Russell Nicolay, he does a Nicolay Law. Oh, they do a lot of, they're in Wisconsin and
Russ Nicolay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm starting with his firm, but basically he has a dashboard now so he can see, who's watching what. They can assign one video for the group and they can watch it, discuss it, but he can, you can get some transparency when you're paying for a lot of subscriptions. You want to make sure people are using it. It's a great investment. If they're not, it's a waste of money. So kind of, and be able to customize programs. Hey, I'm a new trucking lawyer. I got my first trucking case. It's this kind of case. Give me the first 5 videos I should watch. And so that way more, because there's a ton of content and sometimes a ton of content and I just keep producing more of it every conference and every time you guys get a verdict, we got more content.
Right.
So
very interesting. So when is the AI conference?
February 18th and 19th. So it's just a 2-day conference. So the format's going to be February 18th through 20th. I'm doing an advanced deposition trial college with Philip Miller. And so Satch Oliver, Joe Freed, Ed Saramboli, Jay Vaughn, Robin Wishart, Maxie Shear, Carl Solomon, Joe Camerlengo. Let's see. I think that's most of them that I think I must mention. But those guys are all rock stars and have been teaching this deposition stuff for a long time. And so I'm really excited about that one. That's just a small workshop, though. 6 people per class, 54 student max. It's going to be back at the Paseo. But, I'm I have all this room. I have all these hotel rooms and all this space. I thought, you know what? because I have it, I'm already there. I've already got, built the infrastructure. I'm going to do an AI conference and do one track for lawyers and one track for legal support staff, and then use the third track there and just do an AI and just do a depositions lecture program. So that way not everybody wants to do workshops. They just want to sit and see the best. But there I got the best deposition instructors there. So that way when they're not teaching a group, they can, each get an hour on a bigger stage, do their best shit on depositions, no matter what it might be. And then, then they'll be available on TLU on demand. So to increase the deposition, because that's obviously such a critical thing, is the depositions in what we do. So I think that kind of, that way we'll have 250, 300 people. It'll be a smaller program, but still have some, I don't like programs to be too small. I like them to have a little energy. So, and it's back at the Paseo. And so by next year, I think we want to do it big enough so we can buy out the hotel, on that week. And next year it's going to be on President's Weekend. So that way it's got Monday's a holiday. So it kind of makes it like people, especially people coming from the dark winter places. Like some people still, even though they're successful, they like to live in the dark and the cold, which is confusing to me. But when I go back to Michigan, it's good to visit people. Like I'm going back to Michigan after I go to Chicago for the AAJ to do a one-day training for the Feiger firm. And so, I'm pretty stoked about that because I like to go home and, see people is kind of fun, but only during the summertime. So, I think you guys know what I'm talking about, don't you? You guys know all about cold and snow and freezing and darkness and yeah, because I came out there in December and that's what it reminded me of. Yeah. Freeze my ass off.
Winter. We're enjoying the summer right now.
It's short.
I bet you are. And then it's like every day. That's a great thing about living here at the beach. Every day is like amazing, and people are out there playing volleyball, right? But so it's no longer like I got to get out there and do something today because tomorrow might be not there. It's there all the time. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's like living on vacation. I don't recommend it for everybody, but I think it's really good for the stress levels if you live on vacation. I'm just suggesting anybody, why aren't you working on that, Kerp?
I'm working on that. I'd love to be out in California. I think I got some time here, but it's coming.
I hope so. We're ready for you. I've got a base laid out here for you, so I know some people here now. You won't have to come in cold. You have to start from scratch. No, it's good. Starting from scratch sucks. Trying to build a network in a community is not really fun. Having a group of people already is a better thing. So,
100. Yeah.
Dan, I was just going to ask you the progression we've seen with you and your business. Going from the Trojan horse to case analysis to the seminars. I mean, first of all, it's just amazing all of the stuff you put together. And I think any young lawyer who is not taking advantage of that is really doing themselves a disservice. And anytime we have the chance to talk to anyone on podcast or in person, whatever, we're always recommending to do your programs because there's so much value. But what I want to know from you is where do you see the next progression? Like, where is this going? You've had this startup from Trojan horse to case analysis to the seminars, and now you're talking AI. What's in the works for people, in the next year or two?
Well, I've been working on keep getting more practical, and coming up in November, I'm doing a civil rights trial with my buddy Steve King, and it was great because our client, the plaintiff, got his ass beat by these dumbass cops in Bakersfield, California, was here at my house, and we were doing a live witness prep with a live plaintiff, and then practicing the direct and cross of this case with a real case after we learned the skills. So, you guys did my boot camp, we learned the skills, but then really I've gotten so much better at teaching people how to apply these newfound skills to trial. But when we do the trial, well, we're going to be doing, prepping at my house and kind of opening that up to people that want to come sit in on it. So that way they can really see the prep, kind of preparation, what I think at a higher level for the performance of trial. I'm not talking about, the discovery process or how to do the best. I'm not even talking about how to do the best deposition, although we're doing the depositions, our trial boot camp or workshop with Philip Miller and Satch Oliver. I'm really stoked because that one's sold out. So we got 10 lawyers coming that with a case and then 5 jurors coming. So, because then we apply the practical, what I trained in the skills and performance with the strategies of Philip Miller and Satch Oliver, because you got to take great depositions, obviously, to have a solid evidence for trial, right? And so I think it's really, and then the AI, I was talking to Panish because Panish is going to present at the AI conference because Panish, you using AI? He's like, yeah, bros, I just used Claude in my last trial, with that drunk driver and all this stuff and cross and, the closing. And he's like telling me also how he used it in, a mediation and did, because he had a mediation for like a $50 million settlement. And, one of the parties wanted 10 million. He wanted to give him 8 million. It was like I don't know what the dynamics were, but he's like, I used it, and guess how much they got? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, they only got 4 million. He's like, I tried to be kind to these people, but they don't appreciate it. So anyways, but he used it during then too. So I'm always excited, especially somebody like Panish's age. He's like 68, who's adopting new technology, adopting new ways of doing things and not being like, I'm impressed by that, right? Because usually somebody gets a super high level of success and they get complacent. Like, my boy Sagi Shaked from Miami. Well, he just did my boot camp this past week with his son, Tomer. And Tomer is starting Georgetown Law School in August. And so he did my full boot camp. And it was so great because now he's going to be able to run workshops at law school for law students. And so that's kind of, I think, one of my next steps too is to get more involved with the law schools. I get, coaches, trainers, people that are in law school to start learning these skills because first of all, it's like I'm building a freaking cyborg of trial, right? If you're in law school and you're teaching your law students how to present with this methodology, and, and you guys, it's been a couple years since you did my program. Like my methodology has evolved a long way. And now we use a truck versus a motorcycle wrongful death case as a real trial of Joe Freed's. And so we have like video dash cam from the truck and photos. So it's like so much easier to imagine the story and use a Google map to train with because that's the most ubiquitous visual there is in a courtroom in an accident case. And so you might as well learn how to master the use of it, right? I mean, there are best practices for everything we do. And it's really about refining these best practices. But I'm psyched too about, going to trial too. Like I just write a check for 20 grand for experts. I'm like, ooh, got to put a little skin in the game here. That's real money. I like money to come towards me, not go out. But, but that's where I really see it going and doing more trial work and, in some either, directly doing the, because I was just in trial 2 weeks ago with another friend of mine on a TBI case. And that was, obviously learning all these stuff in sort of the bubble of training is critical, but then applying it to the real cases. And, as like we did for the case that, I worked on with you guys after we did the boot camp. And, even though it didn't work out the way you all wanted to, I mean, there's only so much we can do. You put the best trial on you want, and you get a judge that guts you and, makes it impossible to, to get whatever. It's like, it is what it is. We're going to run into these things, but that doesn't mean we don't do the best job we can. That doesn't mean we don't use that forum and that time to continuing to refine and build our skills, right? I mean, every time you get to go to trial is an opportunity, not just obviously to get justice for a client and make money and do good, but if you're intentional about everything you're doing and you've trained, well, now you have a forum to really hone your craft, because it's one thing to do, to do this stuff in a nice, safe environment here, but it's another thing to put a gun to your head called trial and have to perform. So I just really see it kind of going more like Trial Lawyers University Live is going to be, live training on trials, like, and having people come to my, beach house here, because that's why we got 5 bedrooms, so we could have a crew here. Oh, it was great because everybody came to my boot camp last week. Everybody stayed at my house. So it even made it more fun, people from around the country, staying here. It was only a 5-person program. And so it was possible, but anyways, so that's kind of what I'm thinking, Bob, is that, kind of just keep learning and just keep applying it to the courtroom and getting to the courtroom more. Because, it's fun to practice all your stuff sparring wise, but sometimes it's fun to get in the ring too and, see what you're made of, see if you can handle those hits. And, and some people are like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that, Dan, because you're really successful at this. You may not be a very good trial lawyer anymore. I'm like, that's possible. I'm open to that. And if that's what it is, I just adjust, that I just adjust. At least I know, at least I'm not like, saying what if, right? What if I could have been, one of the great trial lawyers of this generation, but I was just too complacent, kicking back, making a comfortable living, doing conferences, so that's what I kind of see.
Well, I want to piggyback on something that you mentioned earlier. Trial lawyers it's our job to figure out the value of a case. And there's all these different schools of thought on how to do that, experience, intuition, comparing it to other cases and verdicts, doing big data studies, doing a bunch of focus groups. But something I think we agree on is that the value of the case, while you can get a sense for it by doing focus groups, or you can get a sense for it doing a big data study, the one thing that it doesn't account for is the lawyers in the courtroom and the skills of the lawyer in the courtroom. And so I want to talk a little bit about the substance of what you teach in your boot camps, because I think it's so important. And my personal belief is that it matters a lot, and it cannot be accounted for in these data studies or these focus group settings. What makes a phenomenal trial lawyer in the courtroom when it comes to the skills that you teach at your boot camp? What are the presentation skills that you teach, and why is it so important for getting big verdicts?
Well, once you get past, dispositive motions, the reality is you have the evidence to win the case. You have enough evidence to have a prima facie case. So the question is, does the jury go with you? And, and that's all about, the connection of the trial lawyer with the jury. That's the most important thing I've seen. The top trial lawyers, I got to sit and watch them all. And the thing they focus on more than anything else is what's going on with the jury. What's going on with the jury? And, but that being said, connection is a skill. And since it's a skill, it's something that can be learned and improved upon. And that's why I think it's so important that every trial you do, that you're intentional, that you're mindful of what's the expression on my face when I say good morning to everybody. Is it warm like this, or is it serious like this? Because I'm so wrapped up in my head about what's going on. I'm not even authentically, when I say good morning, I say good morning like this, and it sounds like it's going to be a shitty morning, and the words don't match my facial expressions, which causes people some concern, right? Their little radar starts to go off and be like, oh, that feels fake. Like you're just trying to endear yourself to us. It's not really a good morning. You're not really excited to be here. And so, training our emotional states and controlling them and being mindful of them all the time. Because every time you have a chance to say good morning, or tell me more about your wife, how is her comfort with the truth? How is her brutal honesty help you become the man you are today? And I'm saying it with a warm face, because the only people who are brutally honest with us are people who care about us, right? And if I could say more stuff and be mindful, then if I can get you to start smiling back at me and have a warm face back at me, well, biologically and physiologically, you're going to start to like me. You can't help it if I get you to smile at me with a real warmth. And so, and when you ask a question, have an inquisitive face, because things have to be congruent. Training the voice. Everybody gets nervous talking in front of people. Everybody feels that pressure. But that's why you have to train. You have to train going 10 to 15% slower when you're training your presentation. So much so people think, oh, it feels slow. It feels like, yeah, it feels slow because I'm training slow. Anybody can speed up. Everybody speeds up. You have to train slow. And you have to train your breath too. That's one thing I've realized recently is like when people are under pressure, they stop breathing. If you're not breathing properly, your cadence is off. If you don't have enough oxygen to your brain and your body, you rush. Your voice drops off. You have no air to project with. And that's why training the breath is so important. My friend Dave Clark, who's my mentor, said it's about making the unconscious conscious. All the stuff we do unconsciously to be able to control it all. Our hand movements, people's hands, I watch them and they make these fists and they get in their pockets and they do these weird stuff instead of intentionally using, we can only connect one person at a time. So if we're intentional with our hand use and we keep our hand between ourselves and the people we're trying to connect with, just a couple inches below our chin, well, it draws people's eyes into our face where we can influence them. The ability to direct attention or, so if you look at a visual, they look at the visual. When you look at a visual, you can't look back at the jury because you're insecure. You want to see where they're looking. It's just go look into your eyes. And nobody's going to be looking at your visual. And the same thing, like the biggest, epiphanies people have when they come here is when they do their opening statements and it's like this flat, crappy narrative. Or if they're driving down the street and they're driving right over the jury, so nobody's imagining shit. And, especially and then especially when they've had it's like Sagi Shaked. The guy has had phenomenal success, 7-figure verdicts, 8-figure verdicts, 9-figure settlements. Like he's one of the most, successful, if you talk about money-wise, of anybody that I know. That includes even the Nick Rowleys and I mean, it's kind of hard to compare anything to Brian Panish because he's got 50 lawyers working for him. And, but for anybody that's running a 6-person shop, ain't nobody doing the numbers nobody in the country is doing what Sakisha is doing between verdicts and settlements. And so, it's really hard sometimes. It's harder to get these successful people to rethink the stuff they've been doing because they're like, oh, I don't want to mess with my mojo. I heard one lawyer that was real successful say, oh, I don't go to conferences because I don't want to mess with what I'm doing. And I'm just like, really? You think you're just all that? That like you can't learn anything new. It always boggles my mind. And, so it's really, when people take that flat narrative and then I record it and show it to them and show them how to make it like become like a 3-dimensional illusion, because when there's a verb, you have to create space. If people are walking, if they're standing up, if they're sitting down, if they're driving a car, it's not like we're driving, it's they're driving south. You know what I mean? It's the ability to create the illusion and the timing, because when you see people tell stories of their own lives, they do all this unconsciously. And so that's why you start to be more mindful. You can see these patterns of presentation and connection, right? And the only time a person really looks back at you or us when they're telling us a story is just to check in, to make sure we're with them. Other than that, they're like in their story, they're connecting with the images in their mind. And so, the connection and getting the connection and working on it. So that way, when you stand up, like Sagi's got a trial in like 10 days. And so we're going to be working on it. He's going to AAJ in Chicago. So we're going to work on it in person, but just working on it and, making sure like the voir dires, everybody's like, oh, I don't like to use scripts. I wouldn't be in the moment. I'm like, you're out of your fucking mind. Every great lawyer uses scripts, a script for everything. A script just lays the foundation for what it is. Like, like on the burden of proof, right? You can, people say, oh, it's, whatever, but like Mitnick has a great script. I'm like, now I want to talk to you about the burden of proof in this civil case, as opposed to a very different burden of proof in a criminal case where a person is accused of a crime by the government and may go to jail. It's called proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Have we all heard of this? It requires a very high standard. I won't go through the whole thing, but it's all the script. And the only way to make it look authentic and natural is if you do it enough times, you no longer have to think with everything else. And so it's about repetition. It's about practice. And people don't practice. Nobody practices. People, they get up, they do a focus group, but they're not, most of them aren't taking it like serious, like it's trial. Like, oh, I'm just going to, shuck and jive a little bit, get comfortable in front of people, but they're not doing anything intentional, right? So you got your courtroom now, but when you do your focus groups, people are like, oh, I just do all my focus groups on Zoom. I'm like, if your trial ain't on Zoom, what the fuck are you doing your focus group on Zoom for? You're not learning connection. You're not getting to deal with the anxiety, the nerves of getting up in front of strangers, all that kind of stuff. But when you do those focus groups, if you are running the same scripts for voir dire that you're going to run in your trial, well, then you can, train, right? How big a chunk to each juror? How do I weave the jury together? How do I connect them? All that comes into play, but you only work on that if you got the content down. If you don't have the content, you don't know what you're going to say. I've seen it over. Very experienced lawyers are up there kind of, I mean, obviously the Panish, the Nick Rowley, they can extemporaneously flow off anything and still look natural. But for the rest of the humanity that I've seen, if they're not prepared, it shows. And, people often put the voir dire preparation to the end because, like, it's just like their witness prep they do to the end. And so, and it shows. It shows that it's not as prepared as it should be. And it shows that they're afraid. And then they're afraid to put their clients up. And, so, I guess to answer the question, though, Bob, is people got to train. But also, there are best practices in every aspect of trial. Because there are really 4 quadrants. There's witness preparation and direct. There are best practices for these two that you can't read in a book. You have to train on them. Teaching the witness how to transport, treating the person how to, step into the illusion and relive it, even though they've been traumatized. That is a skill. And getting them to be able to tell their story in front of a group of strangers and get attacked without being defensive is another skill. Cross-examination. You guys, that's a skill. And the substance is different than the skill. The substance is going to change every time. The skill, if you hone it, will stay the same every time. Like making eye contact with the witness before you start talking. Doctor, bringing your hand up to your, right below your chin, in between, your face becomes inquisitive, locking in, right? And having this little hand in front of right between the two of you, which also helps the witness lock into your face. Moving your hand when you talk. Effectively using a flip chart. So you write legibly. People are like, oh, I don't write legibly. I'm like, yeah, because you don't practice writing. Trust me, you practice writing on a flip chart, you're going to learn to write legibly. You're putting one topic per page, like intentionality, meaningfulness with it when you use it. Dropping all the taglines like right, correct, isn't it true, true. And if you can't, if you need it because of the context, to have a long pause. So it's, to become board certified, this requires advanced education. True. Until, and just using true, because we're looking for the truth, using the present tense, crossing in the present tense. Very few lawyers could do that. In fact, if you guys look at your last, transcripts, see, are you in the present tense when you're with fact witnesses, or are you in the past? Because if you're in the present, it forces you to imagine it. And when you tell people the stories of your case, you should always be telling them in the present tense, forcing you to imagine it, practicing imagining your story every time instead of just spitting out facts to somebody. Just every time taking that opportunity to practice in life, because we're all too busy to actually set aside 2 hours a day to practice. But if all those people you connect with every day, if you practice, you will get better. It's just the bottom line, and there's best practices for opening statement and closing. Those are really performance skills. The eye contact, the state control, the hand movement, the voice, within the context of the story you're telling. And then obviously voir dire. What scripts are you running? There's a script for everything. There's a script for, when the juror says, like in my last case, one juror said, this case sounds like bullshit. I was like, another says, this sounds like a waste of time. And it was great because, that's what you want a jury to say, right? Hey, this case is bullshit. Who else thinks this way? Great. Tell me why my case is bullshit. And now you have a nice, conversation and get a chance to get all these jurors off that you don't even have a chance with. I was really concerned about the case too. I didn't think it was bullshit. I just thought it was a really tough case, but anyways. So those are really, skills that in different quadrants. You got to master each set of quadrants. You got to practice them. When you get a chance to get in that courtroom, you got to hone them. And so that every time you go to trial, you're getting better. And you're trying you're not trying the same case, but you're utilizing the same skill set. And you can get real with your skill set. And then, if it's a skill, that means you can get better at it. If it's just you being you, how do you get better at being you? Well, except practicing the skills and owning the courtroom so you're totally relaxed. Then you can be you. That's the key. Preparation leads to relaxation.
So looking at the different components that you talked about, you have jury selection. You can kind of script that. It's still dynamic. You're still interacting with people. They may say things that you didn't expect. Hopefully you've practiced and you're prepared for it. Opening statement, it's more scripted. Nobody, outside of objections, you can kind of run through what you're going to say. Cross-examination, that's a little bit of a different animal. You can have, an outline, you can have questions scripted, but you don't know with certainty what the witness is going to say, what direction they're going to head, if they're going to be consistent with their prior testimony or not. What are you doing in the deposition college? What are you doing in your boot camps when you're training cross-examination to help lawyers that maybe aren't as comfortable getting up there, being on their feet, not being attached to their outline, being prepared to go toe-to-toe with an expert witness who may be, pretty skilled, may have a lot of experience and knows how to be good at dodging questions and not answering directly?
Well, that is, frankly, a little bit beyond the boot camp. That's more like one-on-one coaching, looking at your transcript, going through it and say, okay, because a lot of times the witnesses don't answer, but the lawyer does not follow up and hold them accountable. Like Pash is really good at that. Somebody doesn't answer the question. He said, look, I didn't ask you what time the tea and what was the price of tea in China. I asked you X, blah, blah, blah. True. So like he spanks them. But like that's something you have to like look at your own transcripts on, see when, you let the witness divert you. And because with every question you ask, well, it should be a leading question unless the answer, there's no bad answer. And there are questions there are no bad answers to. But it's either yes, no, or, batshit crazy. And so if it's yes, great. If it's no, great. You have a follow-up. Or if it's like, and if you got the guy's deposition, you got a pretty good idea what kind of witness you're going to have, right? I mean, if you have their deposition and you get, at least one or two trial transcripts, you can see, does this person change on cross-examination? What kind of shticks do they have to try to, fuck with my case? Are they going to talk about their military service and how yada, 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 and somehow work this all in to ingratiate themselves so, to prevent that shit from happening? So, really that's really about preparation. And then, visual, and if you got a cross, you start running some of that cross during the deposition, see how the witness responds. And, this way, if you got a witness who's reasonably honest, if they're for the defense, the most they could ever be is reasonably honest. They can't be completely honest or they never get called, right? And so, but it's just a matter of training yourself to handle every question, every answer, and that, and practicing for that particular witness and practicing for that particular witness. Like when I work with people on their actual trials and stuff, it's like one of the things we do in the focus group is we do the voir dire, we do the opening, but, we do the direct and cross of the plaintiff, because that's a key witness, but also one expert cross, right? So that way the person could practice having those answers that are going to be not direct, handling them, spontaneously looping them, and controlling the witness, because that's the important thing, is that you are the show up there on cross, but also being kind about it too. It doesn't mean you have to be a dick, right? Correct? True. I know you want to tell the truth, asshole. Just these people are paying you so much money, it's hard to tell the truth. I understand. And you have kids and you have a wife and you built this beautiful life on your lies because you need the money. I understand it. I'm not even blaming you. It's who you are. But for this case, we're going to have to get to the truth eventually. And we're going to. And it's going to free your conscience when you do. Tonight, you're getting a good night's sleep because you were honest and the right thing happened. Having that mindset, I think. So but preparing. I mean, that comes down to preparation, honestly. Because I'm teaching the skills. I can't teach all the skills and the strategy in 5 days. If I had a 3-week thing like Jerry Spence does, well, you could do that. I mean, I'm thinking you need 3 weeks if you had an extra couple of days and just work on these scripts, because that shit repeats itself. It's not like every day is a new day and the first lying sack of shit expert ain't a lot like the last lying shit expert, right? I mean, they're similar, but it's just like, and also really controlling your emotional state, because a lot of people get a little ramped up on cross and get frustrated. Oh, the witness is lying. No shit. You mean you got an expert witness who's going to lie? You have a defendant who's lying. Like, if you don't expect them to lie, who's the naive one? You or them. If you're not prepared for all their lie, and then if they lie, the amazing people get frustrated or angry. I'm like, why would you, first of all, the person's who they are. Second of all, they're lying. They're going to lie. So the only thing you should be frustrated is if you're not prepared to handle that lie and shove it down their throat. Because I used to be a full-time practicing criminal defense lawyer. Every time I have a cop or, a quote-unquote victim on the stand, I ask myself one question every day, every time. Am I a better cross-examiner than you are a liar? Because that's what this trial is going to come down to. And, my money's going to be on me, but you may win the day. We're about to find out, though, so let's giddy up. But that's kind of the mindset. They're going to lie, right? I mean, if they're going to tell the truth, that's called direct examination. So,
well, yeah, and Michael and I talk about that a lot. Like, what is, like you're talking about, what is the strategy? Do we actually want them to tell the truth, or do we want them to lie and just dig themselves in deeper and just look so, unbelievable to the jury, where the jury is just going to reject everything that they've said and the defense has said? And so I think that goes just back to, like you said, Dan, strategizing and planning and knowing what your goals are. What are some of the skills that your foundation starts with in the Depot College? So it sounds like you're talking more preparation and strategy separately than the Depot College skills. What does that entail?
Oh, that's a great question. And Philip Miller and Ed Saramboli are publishing a new book on depots. Philip published one with Paul Sculptor a while ago, and Satch Oliver, published his Depositions Are Trial. And, so for full substance of it all, this is not a conversation that I can really, because, I've only done a few depositions in my life. I read a lot of them. I know what a good deposition looks like, and I know what a pile of shit deposition looks like. And, usually I'm reading a lot of pile of shit depositions because it's some inexperienced lawyer who didn't strategize, didn't prepare, and just got in there and, flung some questions out and, wasn't intentional. And, it's real challenging to go to trial with a fucked up deposition. But, I can't answer with substance, because all these, Philip Miller has put together the program with Robin Wishart, and they were out here a couple months ago and we were talking about it, and we're really working on a real training program, because we're going to do a prep session ahead of time with the instructor. So because I said to Philip, I said, look, I haven't been part of this AAJ college you did, but one thing I know about training is that if you have more than one instructor, everybody has to teach the same skill sets. All the students need to have a similar experience no matter what instructor they're in. Because if one instructor is doing it one way, another instructor is doing another, you got to disconnect and you're going to have some frustrated students when they don't understand what's going on. And so the only way that happens is people prepare, right? If people that are instructors or teachers, like take their job seriously. And, it's not just you just show up and be the big swinging dick and like you're so important, you're just going to walk around. No, you show up prepared, you show up with an agenda on, what people are going to get, why they're there. These people are taking time away from their lives, investing their hard-earned money in developing a skill. Now, my job is to make sure that they get a transformational experience from these 3 days. And, and obviously I'm going to learn a ton because I'm going to be doing all the prep work and be in it and stuff. But, obviously I still got to run the thing. But I don't know the exact skills, but the website that has a very detailed agenda and everything is be ready to go this week. Our friend Davin's handling it for us.
Oh, cool.
So, yes, I heard there's a new Trial Lawyers in Wisconsin site being updated myself, which is delaying progress on mine. I don't want to say anything to you guys about how much bandwidth you're using for my web development team, but we're friends. I'm going to allow it to slide. I'm going to, you guys are VIPs here at TLU, so we're going to take it.
I'm sure there's some agents that are working on everything.
Yeah. Right. There's a whole team.
Oh yeah, he's got the best looking group of agents I've ever seen. I'm like, no, these are definitely AI people. They're all like,
focus on work anymore, Dan. All these
I know. Agent, I know. It's fascinating out there. The new world of technology and AI.
Curious, like we've talked about kind of the foundational skills. We've talked about preparation. We've talked about testing. We've talked about high performance skills in the courtroom. You've spent probably more time than anyone else that I know, maybe anyone else ever, around the best trial lawyers in the country that have had the most success in the personal injury space. And you yourself, I know just from knowing you, I know your mindset, and I know that you like tackling hard things. You're always trying to learn new skills. You're learning to fly a plane. You're starting things that no one ever have thought about doing before. What are the common traits that you're seeing in the best trial lawyers when it comes to mindset? And how does that translate to success in the courtroom?
Well, the best trial lawyers, really have a mindset of the student, of the curiosity of what can I do to get better? What did I do that worked? How do I get better? How do I get better? And so that's, I think a good part of it is, having a curious mind all the time and being open to feedback. Because a lot of people are not open to any feedback. I mean, it's crazy when people come to my boot camp and, I'm coaching them on stuff that they know they're going to get coached on. It's not like anybody's surprised by what we're learning here. And they get like defensive with me, like their feelings are hurt because I'm pointing out that they look like they're, having a neurological malfunction. And it's like, it blows my mind how people can be so thin skinned when they're paying me they're not paying me to blow smoke up their ass. Like Shamia Fagan, who's teaching the Claude workshop, I said, what was your biggest takeaway from the boot camp? She's like, honestly, getting critiqued. She's like, because I've been in politics and, I've debated and I've, for 10 years and a lot of speeches. And every time I go to somebody, everybody's oh, how great I am. How, because, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, how does that help me get better? She's like, I don't think you said that once to me in 5 days. I'm like, if you do something well, I do tell you you're getting better. I just don't blow smoke up your ass. And so, so it's about being able to take feedback and just obsession with improvement in, incremental improvement, but also the best ones, they really care. I mean, it's not like they're not just phoning it in. It's, of course, everybody wants to make a lot of money and be rich. Obviously, who does, like, if you're going to do something at a high level, why would you not want to get rich? You know what I mean? That's like silliness in America. And so, but besides the money and stuff, that they truly do care about what's going on, especially like somebody like Panish, who's got more money than he could ever spend in multiple lifetimes. Yet he's in the game. He's trying. That's when people are like, oh, Mark Lanier's the best trial lawyer. I'm like, no, Mark Lanier's a great trial lawyer, but to me, he ain't the GOAT. The guy who's the GOAT, he's trying, Panish. He's trying 10 cases a year, all types of cases. He's got, 50 lawyers working for them, but a lot of them have big results, big verdicts. Spencer Lucas, Glassman, Shea, Ravaputi, the list goes, Rudorfer. But he's got like 7 lawyers there besides himself that have 8-figure verdicts. And yet they stay. They stay to be part of the PSR instead of going out and doing their own thing. I mean, most of them, obviously a lot of people leave because they're lower on the totem pole and they got a chance to go shine somewhere else and be the big shot. Who's not going to, a lot of people are going to take that opportunity, but he's really built a, great team and, and he's a good person. He's a kind person, which is great because like some people get real successful and they become assholes. They walk around like they're so much better than everybody else. And you could just tell by the way they talk to people. They're just analyzing people like, what can you do for me? Do you have any value for me? And if they don't, they get dismissed. You know what I mean? It's not like, how do I help you become great? It's like, you're not anything to me. And I'm way up here now. And, but Panish is far from that. And so we all know people like that. We don't have to mention any names here, but people know who we're talking about that are around enough, Anyways, but really it's just about focus, emphasis on getting better and curiosity. And, things like you're talking about figuring out the numbers and stuff. Like, I think the big data is important, but I think it's of not the importance that it's not like the word of God. Because I've seen many, these guys only talk about when their things come out great. They don't talk about all the fucking missed shots. They don't talk about all the people they told the people it was $300,000, but the lawyer didn't believe it and got $8 million. Whereas if they would have listened to their data studies, they would have lost millions and millions of dollars for their clients, right? You don't hear those stories. You just hear the stories of success. Like it's like this infallible, and like all these big data studies, like who really is the people taking these things? How close are they to your jurors? And are they, honestly, the truth is, it's like, do you know they're even real people? Do you know? You don't know that. You don't know it's not just an algorithm. Like, what's that guy, Robert Hirschhorn? He has this new AI focus group thing. What's it called? Verdict Hub or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it's all, with AI these days, do you even need to do these human studies things? I don't know. These are all important questions, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the trial lawyer believing in whatever number they say. And that's why I think a big value of the big data was giving people something to believe in. Because, the value of a leg is totally subjective. But if you have this survey that says it's worth $20 million and you stand up and say $20 million, like the word of God, you're likely to get that number, right? If you hesitate, not so much so. So,
yeah, I think that's kind of our view is that I think it's all good data and it's all good things to reference, having a big data study or one focus group or doing whatever. But at the end of the day, you have to really go with your gut and what you feel you can legitimately ask for and have the jury feel comfortable in believing you. And if you, like you said, if you don't believe it, they're going to sense that and they're not going to buy into what you're, telling them. So I think it's all good things to evaluate, but at the end of the day, you gotta know your case and you gotta be comfortable going in and asking for whatever amount that is.
I think right. It's that. I think, it's not a substitute for doing the hard work. And that's my concern with it is like, you have trial lawyers who maybe they're not used to doing focus groups or not used to doing a bunch of dress rehearsals before a trial. And now they see doing a big data study as like a substitute for doing all of that work. Oh, I did a big data study, so now I'm prepared for trial. Well, that's not, it gives you some information. It gives you feedback. You can use it for strategy, but that's not the same thing as really practicing, testing, seeing the reaction of people, in front of you, trying to make eye contact, using your exhibits, all the things that you teach. There's no substitute for experience like that. So, I have a lot of friends who are younger. They're just starting to try cases. They're interested in trying cases and they're excited about big data. And I told them, look, if you got a big case, I'm not saying don't do it. Just don't look at that as like, okay, that's your trial prep. And I think some people do, unfortunately.
I think it's a good starting point, at least, to know kind of what the strengths and weaknesses of your case are, how people see it with just the black and white data. And then you got to go from there and like work up with the focus groups, keep working on the case, changing the variables, and getting it to the point where you're able to present it to the jury. So I think there's value in all of this stuff. It's just how do you incorporate it, with your trial prep? And that's, I think, where taking that stuff and going to your, boot camp and having those actual skills is really a whole package that you have to have. And especially for younger lawyers who they don't make it into the courtroom anymore. We have Zoom, half the stuff we do now is on Zoom. Younger lawyers don't even go into the courtroom to argue a motion. So having the boot camp like you do, Dan, I think is really important for the younger people to get up on your feet and actually be talking to people without a podium, not hiding behind the desk. And that's a really important skill if you want to be a good trial lawyer.
Yeah. Something I really liked about the boot camp was when we did opening statements. You're usually in a group of, 8+ lawyers from around the country. Usually there's some highly successful lawyers in the room. And when you get up and you're early on and kind of framing your case and you don't know exactly what demonstratives you're going to use and you're still kind of developing your opening statement, it's so valuable to get other people's perspectives who maybe come from different practice areas. You got a med mal lawyer listening to a premises case. Maybe you have somebody who does business litigation. They're not used to hearing it. But everyone, just workshopping your opening and, of course, getting your feedback on the presentation, it's like an added benefit. You're working on, maybe the cross exam or you're working on a direct exam in the boot camp, but then most times you're getting people practicing their openings. And I learned so much just from that alone. I didn't even expect to get, all of that value. So I don't know if you're still doing that, if people are still doing their openings in boot camp, but.
Oh yeah, no, we spent a lot more time because now the boot camp is 5 days instead of 3 days. I'm not sure how long it was when you did it, but the first 2 days we just work on the skills of cross and the opening statement performance skills. And then we apply those skills to the cross-examination of the defendant truck driver. So nobody's ever practiced this, but they know the opening. So that way they can practice it, telling the same story, leading questions only with the skills of cross. And then from there, we do people's own cases where they get up and just give a 2-minute opening. So but we take it and spend, half an hour, 40 minutes each and rework it. So now it becomes a hologram, a 3-dimensional hologram. But after that, then the next session, they're practicing the cross-examination of the defendant or the corporate rep in this case, whatever it might be. But they're just practicing telling a story through cross that, it's the same story as they're telling in their openings, right? So you practice those skills, applying those, because like the big, jump for me, I always just assume when you teach people the skill, they can apply it to their own cases, but that's not true. Like they can learn the skills in the vacuum, but until they start seeing it applied to their case, and then, we keep the groups together now too. So if there's 5 people in each group, those 5 people stay together the whole time. So they know each other's cases. So when they're working on each other's cases, it's pretty straightforward as to what they're doing, and people can chime in because they know the case, right? If you're always mixing the group, but you don't know that everybody doesn't know each other's cases, right. And so that's been a real development improvement too over time, and really getting used. Because obviously, I wanted people to work on their cases because I want those cases to get way the fuck better. I want them to go knock that case out of the park so they can come back and do a podcast and tell everybody how they learned all these new skills at boot camp and went and translated to a verdict. And and I want to get better at my own skills, right? Like I can do my set pieces in my sleep, but when I have to challenge myself to tell, a story of a trip and fall because of tree roots growing up a sidewalk and all this other stuff, I got to create new mental models and practice them and then teach it to the students so that way they can do it themselves. And that requires some mental flexibility on my part, the creativity, which, is exciting for me because when these people get up and do it, they're like, watch their eyes open. They can actually see the story that they're telling now instead of just, giving the words and trying to remember, what I'm talking about, where they're like so stuck on. That's why I always tell people, you can't train on your own case, because when you're training on your own case, because so many people are like, oh, I don't want to do your boot camp. I just want you to help me with my case. I'm like, that's great and shit. And I will do it because I am a capitalist. They want to pay me to do it. But I don't think it's in your best financial interest or long-term learning. Because if you learn the skills, then you can apply them. But until you take the time to do the repetitive movements to learn a skill, yeah, you don't have the skill. You can try to do it, but it's like you can't, and nobody can adjust in the middle of battle. And I haven't seen anybody yet that can actually work on their case and start learning skills simultaneously. Nobody has enough bandwidth. It's like, it's overwhelming. So you got to learn skills separately, then apply them to different, and then in the class, you see these skills being applied to so many different types of witnesses and cases. You're like, okay, I get it. I'm more flexible now. But you got to practice too. I mean, just no substitute for the practice. And that's one thing I love about the boot camp. So it gives people that want to get good, they now have something they can practice. They can practice. And if you practice and you practice with intentionality and you hold yourself accountable, you will get better. If it's like some people practice golf, they just go out to the driving range and swing away for 150 balls and aren't videotaping themselves, don't have a coach, aren't getting feedback on a regular basis. Well, they're probably going to improve a little bit or just kind of refine their slice so they can like aim in the other direction so the slice lands in the right place, but they're not really improving their skill set, It's about, constant holding yourself accountable and pushing ourselves, because it's easy to get complacent when you start to have some success and you have, money in the bank and you're not fucking all stressed out about, next month's overhead, and especially you tend to get, it can be exhausting too. You get tired. You're just like, oh, it's not worth it. But, and for most people, it's not worth it. That's why there's so few trial lawyers. But for the people that's worth it, well, if it's worth it, I always tell people this is the best time to become a trial lawyer because everything's there for you. The greatest trial lawyers in the world are willing to share their shit. There's TLU on demand for, $100 a month. You can fucking learn from the greatest people. And if you want to fucking really learn your skills, you can come to boot camp and actually fucking learn the skills of being a trial lawyer, hone those skills. And if you want really good, go home and teach others. Because I don't know, when you guys can start running workshops, in your courtroom, that's when it's really going to change things. When you have scheduled workshops for your other lawyers there, and you're doing, I just tell people, start with the cross. Doctor, you're a board certified medical expert, and you can master that cross. You master because you want to take one skill, and cross is the most important one to master because, well, they say closing's for show, the cross is for dough. That's what Roger Dodd says. And it's one of the more difficult ones, but if you master that gives you all the foundational skills for the direct, for the opening statement, and even for the voir dire if you master cross. And once you can master the cross of the defense medical expert, you know what it takes to get to mastery on one thing. Now you have an idea, okay, it took me this many hours, this many days of practice to get to where I feel that I can not adequately teach it, but teach it and really benefit others. Because when you get to that level, and you should start teaching way before you think you're ready to, because whatever you know is substantially more than the person who knows nothing, okay? No matter where you think you're at. And if you try to demonstrate and explain to somebody the whys and you give them feedback, you're going to get so much better, so much faster. Because the reality is that the person who gets the most out of teaching this stuff is not the student. It's the guy up in front of people. Because if you're up there and you got a 5 or 6 person class, you're getting time on your feet. You're getting presence. You're building your eye contact. You're having to read their faces constantly and see when they're confused and say, hey, Mike, you getting it? And you say, yeah. And I say, you sure? No, I don't really understand. Help me. Yeah, that's most jurors. Nobody wants to admit they don't understand something everybody else does. But we have to be able to read their faces and read what's going on with them and, and get them to, and because if somebody's confused and you can't read their face, you just think they're just following you. Well, you lost that juror. I mean, so it's building those skills. And now that you got this fancy courtroom, you got to get some use out of it, boys. So we're waiting. I'm waiting to, and when you do, make sure you videotape that and send it to me. Or like when you do the initial one, you let me know. I'll come out to Wisconsin, so I could be part of your initial training of the skills at Washington, whatever, what trial lawyers in Wisconsin, whatever. That's right? Trial lawyers in Wisconsin. So, but it has to be during the warm months. During the warm months, guys. Don't bring me out there again in December.
It's a small window.
I know.
Yeah, no, we'd love to have you. We usually finish with this question, and you're the perfect person to ask. If you could change one thing about the plaintiff's bar as it is, what would it be?
One thing about the plaintiff's bar. I think if I could change one thing, I would change all the education. I think that most of the education they do at the state levels, and most of all these conferences are the education component is subpar, like all the state levels, because nobody's thinking outside the box. Almost every organization has entrenched bureaucracy. Oh, this is how we have to do it. This person has to speak this year because they're the vice president. Right. They don't have anything to share. They never tried a case, but they got to speak. And then it waters down the substantive part of it. People don't want to come to it. Nobody's thinking about networking. Nobody's thinking about building community. All these little things that are really easy to do if you just put a little bit of effort out. Like even in your Wisconsin, it was I had a great time out there. It was a great group, but I was like, why aren't there workshops here? Why aren't there 3 or 4 workshops going, at the same time? A, people are on their feet, learning skills. B, it generates revenue because if you charge for them, you have to charge for them. And people are getting connected. You get more people teaching, more people that feel invested. That's a little thing. People writing personal bios. Who are you? You know what I mean? To all the people who are coming. There's so many people that were in Wisconsin. I'm sure you don't know their names, right? That are part of your communities. But this way, you just really intentionally work on building the community, starting at the small. And, so that's really it, how they do the conferences. And all these people, I always volunteer my time. I'm like, I will help you. You don't have to pay me anything. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to run a better class, a better conference for your local trial lawyers. Because I know that 95% of them ain't never leaving their states. They ain't going nowhere. And so the more we can bring to them, the better, the more just the world is going to be. And the better they improve these programs, more people are going to want to come. Because in most states, maybe 25% of the lawyers are at the conferences. Maybe. And you just have to figure the other 75%, it ain't worth it to them. It ain't, people, time, money. No, it ain't worth it to them. It's the bottom line. If it's worth it to them, they show up and they pay. If it's not worth it to them, they don't. They stay home. But, people got to design programs that make it worth it. And, set aside all of the bullshit parameters. Oh, we have to be so inclusive. We have to do this. We have to do that. No, build a program for the attendees instead of for, the board of directors that, has to be pleased. That would be my wish for the plaintiff's bar. But one day, but it's getting better. Like people are doing a little bit more at these conferences, having games and stuff. I see some places with workshops. We did some workshops there, but it's not easy to break through the bureaucracy of the way things have always been done. Because typically people running these things, they get paid the same amount, whether or not they do something brilliant, whether or not the program doubles, Right. So anyways, that's my thought.
And some of the people that are in charge of it don't want to teach people because that then becomes their competitor and they want to keep their information, secret and proprietary. So why would they want to help someone else? So they talk about what's the change in the law and how does this statute work? And anyone can go to Westlaw and find that out. Like, why do I need to go to a seminar to learn that? Like there's no value for me. Like you said, it's just the wrong thing to be teaching for trial lawyers.
Yeah. Right. And that's why, people have to be vetted better. You know what I mean? Like, and not just but it's the thing is so hard to change things when it's like everybody's got to have a voice. Everybody's got to be included. Doesn't matter if you haven't done shit. Doesn't matter if you never tried a case. Well, we got to include you. Yeah. Right. So anyways, but it's great.
Thankfully, you're raising the bar so high with TLU that I think
I'm working on it every day. Although the show I do it for.
I genuinely think you've raised the bar, and I think a lot of state bar associations are now looking at themselves and thinking, well, how are we going to compete with this? How are we going to have people be satisfied when they come? And it is just boring, and there aren't workshops, and it's not well run. And they compare it to something like the gold standard TLU, and So I think that's been good. I have seen some improvements. I just want to give you your flowers at the end of the podcast because, everybody knows what you've done for the community. Everybody knows how valuable Trial Lawyers University is. But just personally, as a mentor, as a friend, like something I really admire about you is that you always look to build people up. You're always trying to raise people up and elevate their game. You're a big picture thinker. You're very positive. It's always about getting better, about taking people to the next level. And you've inspired us in that way. You've been so generous with your time and always, giving us good ideas, for our practice, for our trials, for our strategy. You're probably the kindest person I know in terms of, hey, come stay at my place, come to my boot camp, come out here. You're always inviting people, being inclusive. And so I think the plaintiff's bar, I mean, I know everybody is, but for anybody who's listening, if you don't know Dan Ambrose, if you've never had a chance to meet him, if you've never been out to TLU, come, meet Dan, meet all of Dan's friends, everybody that goes out there. It is like, out of any conference that you could go to, it genuinely is the easiest place to make friends and the best group of people. And then on top of that, it's well run. Like everything is just A game. The buffet, the food is A game. The workshops are A game. The lectures are A game. It is no noise. There is no boring lecture. There is no useless workshop. You're going to learn so much, and really appreciate your time today. So I just wanted to give you that, because anybody who's listening who hasn't had exposure to TLU, you got to get on TLU On Demand. You got to get out to the conferences, and that's not just a pitch. Like, that's a genuine suggestion. So.
No, I appreciate being here, and my cell phone's 248-808-3130 if anybody needs to get a hold of me, or you can text me, or you can email me at dan@triallawyeruniversity.com. If you don't have TLU On Demand, I'll send you a 30-day code. And I sent you a 30-day code too, so that way anybody that wants to try it out can try it out and, see if they get value out of it. If they do, great. If they don't, it's okay.
There's something wrong with you if you don't.
There's no reason why you wouldn't, unless you just don't want to get better. I mean,
so
unless you don't watch it, if you put in, 3 hours a week and you watch one program a week, or watch 3, you're going to get ideas about your kid. You're going to get better. And if you're constantly doing that, you're constantly thinking about getting better, you're going to get better. No, it's not possible not to get better. Not possible.
Yeah. I mean, you could go listen to Brian Panish break down a verdict, or you could go listen to your updates and your ethics CLE credit. So it's not really a comparison if you want.
Yeah, we don't do a lot of that. I'm working on having more of that general stuff just so people can use it to get all their CLE shit. But that shit's so boring. It's hard to make ethics interesting. But unless it's like, okay, this prostitute hires. No, I'm kidding. It's a little joke, little humor.
I'm signing up, Dan.
Little humor. All right, guys. You guys have a great time in Wisconsin. Enjoy the nice weather out there. I got 2 more months of it left, and I will see you probably not too soon, but because you guys aren't coming to AAJ, which it's right near you, but next you should come to the AAJ. It's a little boring, but it's great. It's important role they play. I wish they too. My friend said to me, this law student came to my last conference. He goes, I was at the AAJ and I sat in there at the end, where they have like their board to talk to me. He goes, like literally 20 minutes was, why can't we implement more things that TLU is doing? And it's just like, it was so funny because they're talking about TLU for 20 minutes. I'm like, tell them to call me. I'll be happy to help them.
Awesome.
Happy to help them make their place better, but they don't call. It's weird. But anyways,
well, hopefully
thanks for having me, guys. Yeah. Hopefully. And if anybody, and also remember, we always do law student scholarships too. So if there's any law students that listen to your program, all they got to do is apply, and they most likely, unless they're complete idiots or use AI to write their application, they're likely to get in. So just keep that in mind too. Okay. Well, I'll see you guys sometime soon. We don't know when, but sometime soon. Good luck in trial. I can't wait to do another case analysis on the verdict. So we'll be ready for it. And if you guys record any of your focus groups and you want to do any Zoom feedback on them, let me know. I'm here. Okay.
Absolutely. That's good.
All right,
guys. Take care. Good seeing you. Thanks a lot for having me. Bye-bye.
Yep. Appreciate it, man.